very important one. It's not a secret that Nigeria is facing very serious and increasingly complex security challenges. And although the Nigeria Police Force has the primary responsibility for internal security and maintaining public order across many parts of the country, we've seen how the military has been increasingly deployed to perform internal security functions. And as a result of this, communities continue to experience insecurity. They contend with inadequate police coverage, and there's now very little confidence in the institutions responsible for their protection. So this has partly formed the basis for why there have been calls for decentralizing policing. And these calls have now gained momentum. And the argument is understandable. You know, Nigeria has 36 states with very different security realities. What works in one part of the country may not necessarily respond to the challenges in another. So a policing system that is closer to the communities could improve intelligence gathering and response. But at the same time, there are critical questions that we need to start asking. We need to ask what happens when the institutions that are supposed to protect citizens is controlled or influenced by political actors. How do we prevent state police from becoming another instrument for intimidating political opponents or suppressing or even influencing, elections? So there are lots of questions that need to be asked, lots of things need to be challenged, and lots of things need to be properly assessed. And so that's part of why we're having this conversation today. I'm sure we're also aware that as this national policing bill is being developed, the Presidential Working Group has opened the process for public input, and the deadline was recently, I think on Friday, extended and is now on the 21st of August. So it now means that that discussions and perspectives I shared here today can contribute to a wider national conversation that's still very much ongoing. So with that being said, and without saying too much more, I want to thank everybody for being here. Thankfully, we have assembled an excellent group of panelists and a moderator who will help us interrogate these issues from different perspectives. And so I'm glad that we have a full room today to go through this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to an insightful discussion. And I will now hand over to our moderator for this afternoon. I'm not sure if he is here or if he has speaker's access. I see he's here, but it hasn't been upgraded. So if please, comms can please upgrade him to a speaker so that he can speak. Yes, okay, I see that has been done. Thank you. So I will now hand over to the Executive Director of TAP Initiative and International Human Rights and Criminal Lawyer, Mr. Martin Obono, to take on the conversation from here. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you so much, Noya. Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are in the part of the world, and good evening. Thank you so much for this very important conversation that has to do with state police in Nigeria. We all know that it is a very, very important conversation as it stands now. And to do justice to this conversation, we have, I'll basically, first of all, introduce the various people on the panel, and then we can dive into the conversation as it were. So the first person I'll be introducing will be Mr. Okechukwu Nwaguma. He is the coordinator of Network on Police Reform in Nigeria, NOPRIN. If you're very much within the done work around the police system, you would have known that NOPRIN has been one of the biggest organizations that has always been fingering the Nigerian police. And they've done a lot of reports back in the day, and they are still churning out reports till now and doing extensive work around police sector reform. So he's a very prominent civil society advocate for police reform, accountability, human rights, criminal justice reform in Nigeria. Like I said earlier, he has spent decades working to strengthen accountability within law enforcement institutions and has been working in monitoring and documenting police abuses, advocating for institutional reforms, and promoting improved police community relations. If you're on the group, you might just want to use an emoji to clap for him. Since we can't hear you, we can't see you, just clap, clap, clap. Thank you very much as I introduce each panelist. Thank you. We are doing very well. Thank you. So second is Mrs. Kemi Okeondo. She's my boss, my leader. These are the Mrs. Kemi is one of the people, Mrs. Okoyando is one of the people who literally trained me in the civil society sector as a very young person who was trying to, I'm not saying she's old now, so just don't, is in the sector while I was very young in the sector. So she trained me and put me through a whole lot when she was in Clean Foundation. She's also very, very passionate about security governance and the rule of law. She's the executive director of Partners West Africa, Nigeria, P1, and with extensive experience in policing in Nigeria, accountability, criminal justice reform, gender response security. She founded Partners West Africa, a women-led organization focused on security, governance, and criminal justice reform. Her work has particularly emphasized police accountability, citizens' engagement with security institutions, and strengthening women's participation in peace and security. Please, can we do the same thing? Clap for her virtually, virtual claps. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next is actually Mrs. Okoyondo introduced me to CP Emmanuel Ojukwu back in the day. CP Emmanuel Ojukwu has been a friend of civil society organizations, especially Clean. And Mrs. Okeyondo worked closely with him rather, while he was in the Force headquarters, where he was at Force headquarters. So he's a retired commissioner of police. He's the provost of Police Public Relations School. He's a retired commissioner of police. He's a very seasoned police officer and security professional with extensive experience in police operations, administration, training, and public relations. He previously served as the Force Public Relations Officer and has worked across different areas of policing. He comes with so much and wealth of experience in terms of talking about police and security in Nigeria. Please, let's put our hands together for him. Thank you. Awesome. We are doing very well. Thank you. So the next, I won't say the last person. The next person is Funke Barua. Funke Barua is a gender and development practitioner. When she was in Ford Foundation, she was everybody's darling in terms of looking for funding and getting support for work that has to do with feminist and public safety and policy. So she is she's a gender and development expert and practitioner. She's a Nigerian gender and development practitioner, feminist and public speaker with extensive experience in gender advocacy, public policy, governance, and civil society strengthening. She has worked across government, civil society, and international development institutions with a strong focus on women's rights, gender responsive governance, and inclusion of women in decision making. Please, let's put our hands together for her. And I would like to also further introduce Ms. Abiodun Baiwu. She's the Executive Director of Global Rights. A very, very powerful woman, powerful to the core. She's the country director of Global Rights and the Executive Director of Global Rights. Sorry for that distraction. Then I would like to introduce Professor Chidi Odinkalu. Please, can I put our hands together for Abby for this because she's our host. If she says we cannot do this, then we can't do this. Professor Chidi Odinkalu is a professor of practice, my oga patapata, and international human rights lawyer. He teaches law at Fletcher School, Tufts University in the United Kingdom. I don't think he needs any introduction as far as you're on this call in terms of the kinds of things he has done, especially within the security sector, within security sector reforms, and the things they did while he was at CLO and Open Society Justice Initiative. Please let's put our hands together for him as well. Now to the meat of the matter. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So you are the one who first spoke, so you speak now. So can I ask you this question, Abby? Is state police actually the solution to Nigeria's insecurity, or are we simply decentralizing an existing policing problem? Sorry, before you answer this question, let me give background as to the timing. Each person is going to have 3 minutes to talk and then follow-up question of 1 minute. So when you exhaust that, because we have a total of 2 hours and we've done an hour, 50 minutes so far or so far. So please, you have the floor.
You'll have to ask that question again, Martin. I'm really sorry.
Okay. So is state police actually the solution to Nigeria's insecurity, or are we simply decentralizing an existing policing problem?
That's a very heavy question, and it sounds like the entire gamut of issues that we should talk about today. But rather than go straight into that, because it's a lot and there are better experts here at in the meeting with me, and let me first acknowledge our speakers. I am not your host today. I'm a guest like everybody else. Our host is our country manager, Bumi Aweda, and Noya Sedi, who is the program officer. But this is a very important debate, like you said, and we have the right experts here. Dr. Ojukwu is here. Kemi Okenyodo is here. Funke Barua, who has gone beyond, and I always feel that, and I'm sorry if I'm taking part of my time, I always feel that sometimes we limit people by just defining them by a single aspect of the work they've done. Funke has done way more than gender. She's gone into security issues and has spoken very brilliantly at the federal level and at the grassroots level on these issues, even if gender remains a cross-cutting issue in the work she's done. We've got Kemi Okenyodo is here with us, and Professor Chidi Odinkalu is here with us. So you are starting at the bottom rank of the great expertise here. But I think that it's very important to understand where we're coming from if we want to think about where we're going to. Is state policing strange to Nigeria? No, it's not. State policing has existed in Nigeria as far back as 1830 or 1860 with the colonial administration, even before the formal colonial administration, the Royal Niger Company. And it was a tool of oppression for citizens. It wasn't just the provision of policing to secure people within a territory. And it grew from there. It grew, the constabulary in Lagos grew to other parts of the country, and it was run federally. Well, not federally, it was run nationally by the colonial administration. And then right after independence, that we did have some form of both the federal and the state level or regional level policing. Question to ask is, what was done with those type of policing? History bears witness that it was used as a tool of political oppression and the continued subjugation of people across the country in pretty much the same way that colonial governments had done so. Have things changed in Nigeria enough for us to reconsider state level policing rather than at the federal level? I'll say that if history is anything, and if our current state of politics in Nigeria is anything to be reckoned with, that first, we still do not want a proper federal government, and that to then decide that policing is where we will start with our federal government, with running a federation in which states are responsible for assets, for resources, and for primary governance, and making state governors the chief security officers for their states. I think that we might be a bit too ambitious. There are experts here that can speak further to those issues. And I also think that we are also looking at things in terms of the hardcore security of police provision of security, and not looking at the entire governance architecture of Nigeria and how that impacts policing. Is our governance infrastructure strong enough? Do we have departments of government that are strong enough to run themselves, that are strong enough to... The governance failure is not just at the federal level. At the state level, it is worse. And so if then we decide where it is worse is where we want to start policing from, that there's a lot to think about in that regard. So from my perspective, and in a nutshell, and maybe when you ask more direct questions moving forward later, that I don't think that Nigeria is right for state level policing. We've also dabbled into a number of security, quasi-legal security outfits like Amotekun and things that just went rogue with the state governors. And it's not improved security, let's be very frank. Now, there may be no forensic research that has shown what the import of those paralegal groups or the quasi-legal groups have had on security in a way enough to determine, but state level governance in states that consistently declare they're broke and cannot pay civil servants but want to pay the police is very suspicious, is ill-timed, and that the focus that we need in Nigeria right now should be to strengthen the different arms of government to ensure human security before we think of the hardcore policing across states. Thank you. I'll stop there for now.
So you said you were from the bottom, but it looks like the bottom of every meal is usually the sweetest, and you gave us a very good background as to what you think state policing is. For me, one of the major things you have talked about that I take from it is whether our governance structure or infrastructure actually is solid enough to support state policing. And I think that now that we have Dr. Emmanuel Ojukwu, retired CP, welcome, sir. Good to see you again after a long time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I will throw this question in your direction again, just so that we can exhaust whether or not we think state police actually is the solution to Nigeria's insecurity, or we are essentially just decentralizing an existing problem. What do you think, sir?
Thank you for having me. Good morning from where I am now. State policing is just one of the ways Nigeria thinks it can solve a myriad of security challenges. Problems always come, but every problem has a solution. But state policing, as is being proposed, I think it's coming at a very good time, because Nigerians have had insecurity issues up to here, and are looking for a way out. So tinkering with state police may be a step in the right direction if the proper things are done. Over the years, we have realized that Nigerians have not really owned their police, so to speak. I was in Nigeria police for 32 years, from 1984 to 2016. I didn't work with Nigeria police, because the police I worked on had this law act made by the British government in 1943 or so. It took Nigeria 77 years to think of having Nigeria Police Act in 2020. So we never had our own police. It was only in 2020 that I can say that we got our own police, Nigeria Police Act. So we've not really put our money where our mouth is. We want to have police, but we never had it. So now that we're asking of having state police, I think it's a step in the right direction. We want to own our police. But if you want to own the police, you must do the proper things. If you are a good parent, a good father, a good mother, and you give birth to 10 children, you must provide the wherewithal to bring these children to maturity and make them relevant members of society. If Nigeria wants state police, as they do right now, they must provide the legal instruments, the constitution, the infrastructure, and then the funding capabilities to take care of the infrastructure needed for state policing. Police is not like an item in the shop, like grocery. You just go and pick it. No, it's not already made. It has to be made. So Nigerians have to make the police in their various states to work for them. They have to properly create the structure, put in place the systems, and then, of course, the processes of policing. If these things are not done, then America will say, you ain't going nowhere, we're not going anywhere. So I believe we should have these things in place if we are serious about them. We should not be in a hurry about it. It may take up to 10 years to actually be actualized for it to stand. But there are things that have to be done to make the state police stand. It's when the state police stands that it cannot contribute to the fight against insecurity in the country. Right now, we are losing it. We've gotten the military involved for many years, and it is getting worse. So it's good to think of a new way of solving that problem. I welcome state police, but let the proper things be done so that politicians, the elites, will not capture it as usual and use it to satisfy their own whims and caprices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ojukwu, for that very interesting perspective. I think you have basically given a very strong governance structure, which was Abi's major concern for which state policing can actually work in Nigeria when you talked about the legal framework, infrastructure, the systems, processes, policing and funding, and that if we have this particular governance structure, then we would most likely have a good state policing, and that people would most likely not take advantage of that. Thank you so much, sir. Let me move to Professor Chidi Odinkalu. Prof, are you here, sir? Is Prof here? Hello? Prof, can you hear me? Okay, if he's not here, I would like to move to...
He is. He just unmuted his mic.
Okay.
Just open.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. I thought I was the last. That's why I'm keeping quiet.
No, we would like to hear from you so that we would like to hear from you to know what your idea or your take is in terms of if Nigerian police, the state policing that is being introduced by the present administration is a solution to Nigeria's problem, or we are simply decentralizing the problem of policing.
A solution to which problem? Which of Nigeria's problems?
Insecurity problems, sir.
No, I mean, because you said starting from the bottom was the best, I kind of, was, I kind of tried to hold out in the sense that I could get the best. But look, let me say just quickly three things. And thank you by the way, to the colleagues at Global Rights and to you, Martin, for helping with setting this up. First of all, I think proper diagnosis is important. Naming the problem properly is useful. And I think we've got into problems with the way we name this, state police. And saying it is for the purpose of ensuring that the governors are effective chief security officers of the states, and saying that we are using it to solve the problem of insecurity. Everything about this, in my personal opinion, is just wrongly designated. Now, we have a retired CP here, so I'm not even going to go into certain aspects of this, but we need to get fundamentals right. The police is not a security agency. The police is a law enforcement agency. That's the first thing. And we forget that. The only way this makes sense in the context of insecurity is that Nigeria's security crisis is a crisis of the failure to enforce laws properly. But nobody in this thing is talking about whether or not these institutions, if they are created under this template that is contemplated, will contribute to law enforcement. We are saying they will help us reduce insecurity, go and chase bandits, go and chase kidnappers. That is not quite, that's not really the work of the police. The work of the police is investigate, enforce the law, apply the law equally across all persons in the territory. And that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing how to put these things in the control of state governors so that they will feel powerful. That's issue number one. Issue number two is a point that CP Ojukwu has made, which is nobody is talking about what kind of policing model do we want. We have never been involved in that conversation, and citizens have never been involved in that conversation. And policing has been designed by different societies for their purposes. In the UK, you have a policing model by consent. In the US is by coercion. In colonized territories, it is policing by expedition. What is our model and why? Because that is the first political settlement every government desires and should undertake. We have not undertaken that, and maybe from this part of the country, we should begin to think about that. And I hope that Kemi and Okenwanguma will probably address that. One final point, and I'll yield here. Thirdly, is that the issue of state policing should be governed by the fundamental principle of therapeutic medicine. Do no harm. Do no harm. A lot of people are overwhelmed by what they think is solving security problem. But I think Abby has told us why this may end up violating the first principle of therapeutic medicine, of therapeutic care. Do no harm. Nobody is talking about the fiscal deconcentration that should underpin this entire exercise. Okay? If you have states funded as they are currently funded and getting police are called state police to run, you are not setting up state police, you're setting up state armed robbers. Because they will not be able to pay these people. They will owe them money, but they'll give them uniforms and they'll buy guns for them. States that are not funding ministries of justice cannot fund state police. And so if we are thinking about how to make this work, we should not just be thinking about state police. We should be thinking about fiscal deconcentration in Nigeria. And that actually is the basis, the beginning of the conversation. That's the note on which I end. And just to make a suggestion that is hopefully a little more constructive with reference to my first point. I think we should not be talking about state police. We should be talking about policing, decentralizing police, which is actually the language that has been used in succession since 2006 at least, with the Damadami report. It was a matter of decentralization. And then people talked about community policing. But now we're talking about state policing, which is ownership, not functionality. I yield.
Okay. Two key things, and I think Prof essentially agrees with Abby, Dr. Ojukwu, with a little bit of expansion in terms of diagnosis of the real problem. And I think to a very large extent, I tend to agree with Prof, because whenever I see the concept of state policing, I wonder if we are really talking about really decentralization of the police or setting up a different institution, or I wanted to use the word armed groups, but let me just not say that. So different institutions as a whole, which will now affect budgeting and processes and financing, because at the end of the day, if we are saying that we don't have money as a nation, where are we going to get the money to fund and finance state policing? But one of the biggest concerns I've always said, or in defense of what I have just said, is that what is the cost of the human life that we cannot spend so much money to protect? So on this note, I would move to someone actually sent me a message to say that he doesn't understand. This is a private message. Someone in this call sent me a private message, and I'm going to encourage him to send the message on the group chat so that Prof can later answer it. He is not clear as to the distinction between law enforcement, as police being a law enforcement agent, and providing security. So that's a question that Prof will most likely answer in your next in your comeback. So I'd like to move to Mrs. Okeondo. Ma, please, can you also expand this conversation as to whether state police actually is the solution to Nigeria's problem? Because we've had so many people, different people saying it's a solution, others are saying it's not a solution. What do you think? You've been in the sector for the longest time. You've been in the sector, you've been around for a very long time. So what do you think is the problem or the solution to Nigeria's insecurity?
Thank you very much, and good morning from my end. It's not the solution, because the issues we have that have created insecurity in the country are governance failures. So it's not a silver bullet that would address the governance issues that we are dealing with. For scholars, for practitioners within the space that have done work on the insecurity challenges that we have, you would find empirical evidence that shows that what is the root cause of Boko Haram? Root cause of Boko Haram conflict in the Northeast is in respect of lack of opportunities. We're dealing with a large youth bulge, and they have nothing constructive doing. Then we have the challenge of impunity, where the law is not applied equally across board. Some people are above the law. And then you have state infrastructure, state agencies that are not functioning the way they ought to function. We have the issue of political elites capturing the state and using the state mechanics for their own advantage. These are not problems for the police, right? The police now being used as a tool, because when Abby spoke, she traced the history of police in the country. the police structure, not policing now, the police structure in the country, and the police being used as a tool for oppression and repression by the colonial masters still continues to hold sway. That's why you would find a scenario where the budget allocation for where we find a scenario where the police is heavily not well funded, because what is released to them, what is approved, what is released when it is released is being used as a bait, right, to hold certain individuals within the agency to ransom. If these issues are still there, and these governance failures are not governance failures solely at the national level, because governance hits the road at the subnational level. So where you have states that have not provided, that have not addressed the issue of education, they've not addressed the issue of health, they've not addressed the issue of the welfare of the citizens within their jurisdiction. Now clamoring, now having the ripple effect of that lack of, or should I say, of their own failure, of their poor performance, and then you are now asking for another another state infrastructure to try and address that without you looking at what you have not done. I sat down with a couple of friends. I said, okay, maybe we can't stop the conversation around state police now because that train has left the station. But I don't hear any complementary conversation around governance. Yeah, how are you going to fund it? What element, what percentage of your funding will go to the governance issues? Because the police will just the state police might just end up in the same position that the national police or that the federal police is in right now. Secondly, closely related to that is the issue of even the composition of the state police personnel within the state police. We're a country that is still dealing with identity and ethnic politics. So identity is a challenge for us. We see that play out at the national level. And I'm asking myself, when you start populating, when you start recruiting, how are you going to recruit that? Because there is also a clause in our constitution that entrenches that element of identity politics, right? But you didn't look at that clause when the Parliament was looking at the um, uh, constitutional amendment to allow state police to thrive. So I think it's going to be, if it's done the way we are seeing it being done, right? It's going to be, we might be replicating the challenges we have at the national level, at the subnational level. And that would be pretty bad because the narrative they have sold to Nigerians is that militarization of the insecurity challenges. But nobody is talking about governance. Nobody is talking about enforcement of the law, as Chidi has mentioned earlier. Over the past, we worked on the review of the Police Act over like 16 years. And one of the things that came clear was that the police needed to be decentralized, right? And we got to a point where we have a Police Act 2020 that lays the framework for the decentralization of the police. And then 5 years down the line, we're now 6 years down the line, thereabouts, you're now talking about something entirely new. So there seems to be this, I think there seems to be a preoccupation on the part of the political elites on capturing the police for reasons they best know, right? And if care is not taken, if we don't have a set of people that rise above that rhetoric and call it out as it is, then we might be in for the journey ahead of us might not be too palatable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mrs. Okeondo. She also agreed with virtually every speaker in terms of saying that if we don't deal with our governance issue, state policing is not a silver bullet. And one thing that she said that stood out for me was the impunity of what the state police can actually turn out if it is not properly implemented. When she talked that if we don't resolve the governance issue of state police might just end up like the federal police. So on this note, I would like to move to Funke Barua. Funke, please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Martin, and good afternoon.
Awesome. Good
It's good
afternoon.
to reconnect after.
Yeah, absolutely. So the same question I've asked everyone, because it's a very crucial question. There are those who are on the other side to say state policing is actually not the solution to Nigeria's insecurity challenge, and there are the ones on this side who say it's a silver bullet. So if you have state policing, it will bring about community policing and all that. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to help the Nigerian security or security problems or solve the insecurity challenges we have in Nigeria?
Thank you, Martin. You put me in a very difficult position. How do you make me go after Professor Chidera? Are you trying to set me up? And the CP and Kemi and Abby. Oh dear. Okay. Anyway, thank you and good afternoon once again. For me, strictly speaking, I don't think Nigeria is merely decentralizing the existing Nigeria police force. I actually have some faith that the proposed reform sort of creates a genuinely dual police structure, an emphasis on genuinely. I think that state polices would operate alongside the federal police service. The states, of course, acquiring some constitutional authority to establish, fund, and operate their own police forces, subject to national standards and so that. However, that distinction is important. If state police simply reproduces the existing command and control model at state level, then placing the same coercive powers under governors without, any form of independence, accountability, or scrutiny or control, then we would have the decentralized structure without necessarily decentralizing or democratizing the police. And I hear what Professor Chibi was saying, about what exactly we need and the nomenclature that we just give to this current conversation. So the real test for me, therefore, is not whether power, accountability, or professional autonomy and community participation, which Professor Chidi also alluded to. Citizens weren't even consulted, Things just get passed based on who is happy at some point in time, with our government. And that's genuine, altruistic purpose of state policing is what is missing. For me, I think that in terms of whether it can work, the more important questions for me would be, do we need state police? Just speak yourself. What problem are we trying to solve? What is the current institutional architecture that we are in, and what will the state police also operate in? What are the safeguards that will prevent the decentralization of policing from becoming the decentralization of police abuse, which I wrote about a couple of months back in my weekly article around state police versus police states. So while the it has reopened, one of Nigeria's oldest constitutional debates. For me, every Nigerian will agree with you that is long overdue. But the fears that we have is much more than it becoming just an instrument of political intimidation by state governors or emperors, as the case may be. So the question before us is not simply whether Nigeria needs state police, like I said, it is whether Nigeria can build state police without becoming a police state in its own. Do we need it? I would say yes. Do we have the fear of the police among citizens? Yes. But we need to build a state police that is fit for purpose, not just a special purpose vehicle like we always do, throwing solutions to every problem without really diagnosing what the issues are for the sake and for the people. And I dare say that state policing would also, the success of this initiative proposal law will also depend on how each state, builds its own architecture from the manual that will come from the laws. So the strongest arguments against state police is not about security, and I completely agree with Paul that they are a law enforcement agency, they're not a security tool. It is about power. That's the strongest argument, that Nigeria and our democratic history offers little comfort to those who fear abuse, and that could be hijacked by people. But my summary, from where I sit, is that it's long overdue. We don't even have enough. I don't know what the figures are per square kilometer or per citizens, how many police officers we have. Do we need them? Yes. Do we need to decentralize it so that we have levels of command across the 36 states of the Federation plus FCT, rather than just one individual at the center following the shots and nothing can move? Yes. But against that backdrop, the fears of many people are not imaginary. We have, our history is filled with examples of security agencies who have been used for partisan purposes, even under federal control. So the fears are valid, the concerns are valid, but I also think that we should look beyond that to the opportunity that this presents and really design the system or the structure from the very beginning so that we don't fall into the merry place that we already have at the federal police. Over and out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. A very insightful conversation talking about the democratization of the police structure. One thing you said that I take and I'm holding, and I'm really, really holding so tightly to, is that we need state police, but not an SPV. That is very instructive, because it then looks like we are creating an SPV for politicians to essentially use to rig the 2027 elections. And we are basically creating an avenue to empower governors to use to suppress dissenting voices. And this is very important in the overall conversation. So thank you so much for that. And at this point, I'd like to move to Mr. Okechukwu Nwaguma, Executive Director, NOPRIN. And sir, can you hear me, sir?
I'm not of NOPRIN anymore. I'm of RULAC.
Oh,
and thank you for having me at the bottom.
Apologies for that. I totally forgot. It's RULAC, correct? That's correct. Yes. So thank you so much, sir. So being at the bottom, I'm very sure you have all the experience and you will share with us as to what you think state police, if state police is actually a solution to Nigeria's insecurity. So we would like to drink from your wealth of experience at this point. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you. First of all, let me apologize. I tried to log in through my laptop. I was experiencing, a challenge, so I'm forced to log in through my phone. I do hope that you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. It's okay.
Okay, so those who have spoken have said all that there is to say, but I just wanted to, just for the purpose of emphasis, and there may be one other perspective I want to add. First of all, is that this conversation, in my view, is not about policing or about security. The reason I say this is that we seem to be having this debate in a vacuum. I don't know if anyone here has seen any of the versions of the executive bill on state police or state policing, or even the constitutional, the draft constitutional amendment that we are basing this conversation on. I don't know if anyone has seen it, because if this debate is about the people, if it's about the security and welfare of the people, I think that we should be discussing based on knowledge, based on the documents that has been presented, and are meant to legislate, state police. And I think also that if we are talking about security, I don't know whether the police is in a position to address the roots of security. And Kemi has rightly said, and Prof has also talked about the fact that insecurity is more of a governance problem than a law enforcement problem. Section 2 of the Constitution already addresses the solution to insecurity. The factors or the root causes of insecurity are not things that the police can address. It is governance that can address them. Poverty, unemployment, inequality, and all that. And talking about the police, I'm sure that we all know that under successive administrations in this country since 1999, you have had one police presidential committee on police reform or the other, which made far-reaching recommendations on how to transform the Nigerian police. And I don't know to what extent those recommendations, the reforms recommended, have been implemented by the government. And then we have the Police Act 2020, which Kemi has already made reference to. The Police Act is probably the most comprehensive and most far-reaching, reform of the police that we have had since the return to, constitutional government. To what extent has the Police Act been implemented? And the police, and I said this because the Police Act has also, provisions, recommendations on how to decentralize policing in this country in terms of devolving policing authority, devolving resources, devolving, even decision making. It also has provision for, institutionalizing community policing so that you bring policing closer to the people, involve people, the people at the grassroots in determining policing priorities. But to what extent are these? Nigeria is not in. The problem is not shortage of reforms or progressive laws, but it is failure to implement them, and it is because reforms that ought to make the Nigerian police professional, accountable, and effective have not been implemented. We are now talking about creating state police. So what we simply want to do is to decentralize, to decentralize this dysfunction at the national level. We want to decentralize impunity, because the challenge, we are dealing with impunity and unchecked power. If people in government are not willing to obey the laws, are not willing to implement the laws that will ensure that law and order prevails, how then do you want to, decentralize this same challenge? So if you go to the subnational level, and that is even where we have more of the impunity. So what lessons, for example, have we learned from the regional police forces of the Second Republic that the military disbanded because of corruption, because of brutality and all that? What has changed? So at the subnational level, we have governors that we want to hand state police to. These are the same governors that do not only control executive power. In many states, the judiciary is in their pockets, so we don't have an independent judiciary that can, ensure judicial scrutiny or review of, abuse of power by these governors. The various state houses of assembly are in their pockets. So when you create state police, what legislature exists at the state level to provide independent oversight to ensure that power is checked. Look at even the independent, so-called independent state electoral commissions. The governors are controlling them. The local governments are under the control of these same governors. So without reforming the Nigerian police, without ensuring the decentralization that can happen within the Nigerian police to ensure that local levels like the state commands, the zonal commands can have some level of operational autonomy and be able to take decisions without having to refer to Abuja. Even the whole idea of police budget. The Police Act also provides for a means of decentralizing budget so that the budget is bottom top rather than top bottom, So when we, with all these enormous powers at in the hands of these state governors, when we give them state police, we are simply giving them additional armaments to continue to assault dissent, to oppress opposition, and to close the civic space. I think we should think properly about really what the problem is, because if we don't seem yet to understand what the problem is, and that is why we are making the wrong, diagnosis. The police will not solve insecurity. The police can only respond to the symptoms of insecurity. Unless government is prepared to address the root causes of insecurity, all this talk about state police, especially in a situation where we don't even know which documents we are talking about, I think that government is playing politics, because this conversation has been between the executive and the legislature, which, as you know, is standing on the mandate of this executive. Let me stop here.
Whoa. Which, of course, is standing on the mandate of this executive. Thank you so much, Oga Okechukwu. Thank you for this very interesting conversation. However, I'm going to follow up with you on this particular question, because you've talked about the decentralization and you've also expanded the conversation that Professor Chidi was actually talking about when he said insecurity is different from police cannot stop insecurity. Rather, they are a law enforcement agency. And you explained it very well when you talked about the fact that police, definitely insecurity is a governance issue, and police is the arm of government that would automatically respond to it through law enforcement when there's an insecurity situation. And you talked about the decentralization of impunity if we don't implement the Nigerian police very well. But one question I want to ask, the state policing very well. One question I want to ask you as follow-up is that now that you have diagnosed it and said it's possible for the executive, especially at the state level, to use state policing as a tool for political oppression, what do you think we can do to ensure that this does not happen? I understand that you've already talked about the fact that nobody has really knows the version of the act which has been, or the act which is being proposed for amendment, and or the bill that has been proposed for amendment. But in your estimation and opinion, what do you think should be in that law, if you were to be a lawmaker, that will enable protect citizens from political repression, and especially during elections?
Is that for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I did mention that we haven't officially seen the draft bill. We haven't officially seen the constitutional amendment bill. But of course, what we have are different versions that we have obtained through informal sources. And if we have to go by what we have seen from those documents that we're not even sure whether they are the authentic documents that we should be responding to. I have seen a number of, safeguards, introduced apparently to address the fears about political capture. But my worry is that we are not in short supply of safeguards. The Constitution, is very, it has a very robust provision in terms of, safeguards. We have the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. We have the Anti-Torture Act. We have the Police Act, for example. All of these provide sufficient safeguards against abuse and impunity. But in spite of all these safeguards, abuse continues to happen because, in the first place, there is no political will. Look at even the Police Act, for example. When the president personally sent an executive bill for a review of the Police Act to extend the tenure of a certain Inspector General of Police whose term in office had expired. In one day, that bill, executive bill, was heard. It passed through first, second, and third reading and was passed without a public hearing. Again, we are dealing with bills here that the legislature does not even want Nigerians to participate in. No public hearing. So my point then being that it is not enough to say we are introducing safeguards. Safeguards have always existed, but they are not being, respected. I think that under the current police architecture and under the Police Act, it is possible to bring about decentralization, with some sort of deep decentralization. Like I said, it is possible to devolve policing authority, devolve policing resources, devolve even decision making. We have the complaints response units also in the Police Act, but to what extent is this mechanism for addressing complaints and redressing complaints being allowed to operate? So impunity is the problem. Unchecked power is the problem. Unless we deal with impunity, unless we deal with unchecked power, no amount of safeguards contained in this state police bill will make any difference. Let us first of all deal with the issue of impunity. Implement the Police Act. If we implement the Police Act, Nigerian police will be professional, will be effective, and we will not have need for state police.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. So basically, there exist safeguards, and all we need to do is to ensure that we check powers to ensure that state police does not become a tool for political repression, a tool for political repression. And so at this point, I would like to also ask Professor Chidi what he thinks can be done in that regard, in terms of checking, because, sir, you have been one of those who has been against, has been speaking out very vocal. You've been very vocal about whether state police will be used as an instrument for political repression at the state level. What do you think we need to do? Do you think we need to apply mechanisms like the Police Service Commission at the state level for the state police? What mechanisms do you think can be used to hold police accountable, especially for human rights violations as well?
I don't know. I think you said there was somebody who asked a question about security and law enforcement. I've tried to provide some responses in the chat box, but let me be quite clear. The methods of law enforcement are forensic. The methods of security institutions are prophetic. In one sentence. Okay? So, an internal security institution can, on the basis of intelligence, mount an operation to take out a target. SSS does things that cannot be discussed in this conversation. That is not policing. Police is not prophetic. Policing is not prophetic. Policing is forensic. That's the fundamental distinction. It's a fundamental doctrinal distinction. And because we are not interested, English is not our first language. So we think in vernacular and do things, in vernacular. The distinction is so fundamental, it cannot be negotiated. So the first thing, addressing your question, Martin, because this is actually at the heart of your question, the first thing actually is something so basic, we are not even discussing it here, quite apart from the point that OK has made, which is nobody has seen the proposals, whether it's a constitutional amendment or what the Gbajabiamila committee is trying to propose to do. The first thing is a small word called training. Training. In the army, there is something called Training and Doctrine Command, TRADOC. There is a general always in charge of TRADOC, and it used to be that the TRADOC command was at the heart of everything the army did. In the SSS Training Institute in Lower Usman Dam is where the elite of the SSS go. And usually they draw leaderships of the SSS from the training institutions. The Nigeria Police Force used to have the best training institutions in the country. Right now, training in the Nigeria Police Force is dead. If you send somebody to head a training institution in the Nigeria Police Force, it is considered, ask CP Ojukwu here, it's considered a punishment posting. There's no money in it. You're dealing with crisis every day. You're dealing with starvation every day. If you cannot have training, you cannot have police. From law enforcement, how do you do arrest? How can arrest be lawful? When is it not unlawful? How do you process evidence? How do you do weapons handling? All of those things are about training. How do you de-escalate? All of those things are about training. We do not have any training institutions to throughput any of the proposals we are trying to make. I'm not even talking about forensic institutions, basic training. So we're talking about accountability. How can you talk about accountability for people whom you cannot train, whom you have not trained? Is it not when you train people, you then set standards for them and you begin to ask them to account? So if you tell Soludo in Anambra State has people called Akodo. Anybody who, CP Ojukwu is from Anambra State. He knows Ndi Akodo. In addition to, what do you call it? Agona Chamba. Now, when you give Soludo State Police, he will merge Akodo with Agona Chamba, and it will become state police. In Zamfara State, Hisba will become your state police. Amotekun in Ondo will become state police. In Imo State, Ebubagu will be state police. What you are going to be establishing is state militias. None of them has gone through any, and what you then do is you will upgrade their weapons, right? From the pump action they're using at the moment, you will give them AK-47s and uniforms or SMGs with uniforms. And you'd say, this is state police. In that republic, I'm going to go into exile because none of us will be safe. But I don't think people have rationalized this or reasoned it. Can we at least ask for training institutions to be started and for that to work? Let's just be basic. I'm not even asking for police service commissions because that's unworkable at 37 state levels. That is unrealistic. It will not work. Can we at least ask for training institutions that work? This is an opportunity. I'm looking at it as an opportunity. But to make the opportunity work, we really need to ask the right questions. And at the moment, everybody is just escaping into nirvana. This will solve all our problems. No, this will make our problems worse the way we are going, unless we are willing to ask difficult questions. Let me yield.
Okay, when you are going on this exam, let me follow you. Because you painted a very gory picture, and it is really worrisome to see that this is
Please speak to CP Ojukwu here, because there are things I cannot say here. Because I get so many of these reports every day, and I try to verify as much as, but there are really things I feel beholden not to say here. It would be responsible to do so. But I think we are not at all living in reality land, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Dr. Ojukwu, please, sir, can you also help us throw light on what you think can be done in terms of independent oversights to hold the state police accountable for human rights violations?
Okay. I think Nigerians are unfair looking for how to hold police responsible for human rights abuses. There's a saying in management that if you don't train somebody, you don't blame him. Many politicians, I've had a contestation with the governor. He has over 200 policemen in his house, brandishing AK-47. And I told him on national television they are committing suicide in installments. He asked me how. None of those 200 policemen has been trained on how to handle firearms. And as a professional, I know there is nothing like accidental discharge. Every gun has a safety catch. No gun can fire itself except it has been cocked. So when a gun fires, somebody cocked it, he had intention. Now there are rules of engagement, or what we call code of conduct or standard operating procedures on use of force in Nigeria police. But you can take it to the bank. Not up to 1/4 of Nigeria police officers have been trained on use of firearms. So you are blaming them for abuse of human rights. You have not trained them. Who owns the police in the first place? If you are, look, I had a cook. I don't want, I can say this. I had a cook to do something. One day she prepared smoothie for me and all that. My friends enjoyed it. You know, I asked her to prepare another one. She said the blender has been bought. How? She soaked the blender in the sink with water, everything. So it got on. I said, my friends asked me, you brought her from the village. Have you trained her on how to use the machine? We've not trained them, and we are blaming them for abuse of their powers. The Police Act 2020, not many policemen have been trained on it. Who ought to train them, if not the police? Who can fund the police to train them, if not Nigerians, who think that they own the police? So the same thing will devolve to state police, to be garbage in and garbage out, and are in a hurry to unleash them on Nigerians. In any case, if you are a stakeholder, in fact, you cannot question the account of Dangote Petroleum if you are not a stakeholder. So no Nigeria has a right to question the police what they are doing because they've not staked in the police. They just created them. They didn't even create them. They just employed them. They didn't even employ them properly. Then threw them out to begin to unleash mayhem on Nigerians. And Nigerians are even happy. Some time ago, I said that whether state police succeeds or not depends on the people. The more violent the police are in Nigeria, the better they are appreciated. Somebody told me in the bank one day when I came to withdraw money in Mufti. He said, you don't look like policeman. I said, how? He said, you don't look mean and wicked. The meaner and more wicked you are, Nigerians appreciate you as police. Because our concept of police is a man who does odd jobs and dirty jobs. So if the man is doing what is proper in our perception, he's a good policeman. If he does otherwise, he becomes abnormal. There are so many human rights abuses in Nigeria police which are being condoned by Nigerians because they meet our needs. Somebody has a case of land dispute with his neighbor. If he goes to Imo State, he will not go to normal police. He will go to a group they call Tiger Squad that will apply maximum punishment on the suspect without trial. And that person will be happy that his opponent over a little land is being screwed every day. He's happy. And tomorrow, if it happens to his brother, they will say police human rights abuses. So sometimes we benefit from it and we condone that impunity over the years. So in Nigeria, we have a culture of giving immunity for impunity. Those who are in position, they can use the police anyhow, they're happy. But if it's against them, they call it human rights abuses. The bottom line is that the police is able as much as we have enabled them. There are about 44 police training institutions in Nigeria. 44. And just recently, Nigeria made a law. There's an act signed by the president to make them independent so government can fund them. More than 1 year ago, more than 1 year now, not one kobo has been given to any of these training institutions. As if that's not enough, in 2012, you and I will remember, there was a time the president, Goodluck Jonathan, visited Police College Ikeja. He said the media were after him to embarrass him. That institution was dilapidated and shambles. 10 or 5 recruits will be eating a head of fish as meal. They defecate in the open. This is the police training institution. I worked there for 3 days. They sacked me because I couldn't tolerate what they were doing. He went there and said they were embarrassing him. What he saw made him shed tears. But 2 weeks before then, the report of the Pari Osanda report was on his table, showing him the need to pay attention to where you train these policemen that you send to the public. He didn't listen to it until he felt embarrassed. And then he gave the contract to the military to rehabilitate police institution. That's an insult. That's how we place our police. The police were accused of human rights abuses. Somebody may think I'm being defensive. They are also bona fide Nigerians who are going through thick and thin to survive. They went to the same school that people. I have a friend in NNPC. He earned more than 2 million every month, but I earned 200,000. The same. I have first class. He didn't have first class. The same country. I think the police will keep quiet. They're looking for avenues to displace aggression. I'm talking as a psychologist. You need to address the welfare needs of policemen. If they be worse in state police, you can take it to the bar. They may not care. But the more violent, the more aggressive the police are, the better for those who have captured state power. That's what it is. If you train our police on the structure, systems, and procedures of how to make arrest, how to investigate, how to manage persons in custody, how to do all manner of the whole gamut of police duties that are contained in the Police Act. If policemen are trained in all of this, they can do better. And if the state police, when they come into being, because I know they will come into being very soon, are also trained along this line, and we have a national standard, policing standard, that the way you investigate homicide in Zamfara, in the same way you investigate murder in Anambra State, because murder and homicide are the same offenses, but different technologies. If the procedure is different, then Nigerians who are traveling to Zamfara will feel abused that the police are not doing what they ought to do. Training is at the bottom. I think Professor Odinka mentioned that. Training is at the bottom of it. And we're not paying attention to that. And we're missing it, and we shall back to square zero if care is not taken.
I hope we will take care, sir, so that we don't get to square zero. you have spoken so well about training and emphasized a lot about training, and it's quite scary to hear that, to know the number of police officers that have not even been trained effectively in firearms, in the use of firearms. And then we see on a daily basis police officers parading firearms on the road. On this note, I'd like to ask, following your submissions, I would like to ask Mrs. Okoyendo, what are the non-negotiable safeguards that must be put in place before state police can become operational? Having been, involved in the various conversations for the longest time regarding policing in Nigeria. Mrs. Okoyendo.
Thank you again, Martins. I mean, non-negotiable safeguards that need to be put in place. One is the element of capture. There needs to be effective safeguards that the police structure at the subnational level is not subject to capture by political elites, and beyond the political elites, it's even the rich money bags in the society. So where you have a scenario where an individual is building a police station because the government cannot afford to provide adequate building or infrastructure for the police should be a no-no. The other element of it would be, another element of it for me would be the element of representation. The police should be structured in a way that it represents the community that it is going to work with. How would that be? That would mean we need to know the people that are in that community, in that society, so that the police at the subnational level is not dominated by a particular religion, by a particular ethnic group. It shouldn't be an indigenous structure or apparatus. It should be representative of the people living, working, and residing in that place. So minorities, gender minorities as per ethnic, and minorities as per religion, just bringing the high ones. And I dare to push it a bit more, even minorities as per physical abilities or persons living with disability should be represented in the emerging or whatever it is, the structure that is being put in place. We've said a lot about training, which we believe should go to conduct of the personnel, that the personnel should be properly trained. They should be properly resourced, and resource also means they should be properly paid, right? I remember some years back when I think it was the Paris Science Day committee that we were having the deliberation then when we were at CleanEd, and Chidi was part of this conversation, and we were asking that what can make a police officer not be subject to corruption, because the non-taxable money that drops on a daily basis, either by virtue of those that come to the office, or there's no need to overflog it. The process of collecting the money is we know what it is. But when you have a scenario where good schools are provided for the children, that means that you are looking at the police schools, the police colleges, and you have good infrastructure, they have good education, they have good top-notch health medical care, they have top-notch retirement benefits, that they would retire and then be on the streets or be in front of force headquarters protesting every day, right? The package is humane. right? Then you would think twice of sabotaging that on the basis of collecting, is it a whatever it is that is being dropped. So at the heart of it, I always say when we're looking at the safeguard, look at safeguard that protects the right to life and the dignity of person, right? The right to life and the dignity of person of the individuals that would work in this system. If we do that, most likely we might have covered everything. My other safeguard would be looking at the state houses of assembly. We say a lot about the parliament at the national level, but these state houses of assembly, we don't know how they work. We don't know the capacity that resides there. We don't know what they do. They also seem to have been, it's a third arm of government. It's a second arm of government, but a second arm of government that I think is the my apologies, is the weakest, I would say, because the judiciary seems to be a bit have better capacity, although they shy away in some from their responsibilities. But you can talk about the capacity of judges and the persons that work within the judicial system. But for the State House of Assembly, it seems to be a ground for recycling people that have been loyal, so they cannot question, they cannot engage. So that is also what would be that is also a component that I think we need to look at. And I don't think they have come into the conversation at all. When we're talking about the safeguarding, we're usually talking about the safeguarding of the police that we're creating, but we're not looking at the entities that would also contribute to it. Finally, I'll talk about the National Human Rights Commission. The commission should also be up and doing, right? So if I agree with Chidi, creating multiple levels of police service commissions is a chaos. Yeah, we're creating fiefdom for people that want power. How would we coordinate and how would we harmonize this? That would be a challenge. However, if we have, at least to a reasonable extent, if the Human Rights Commission is up and doing, which means the commission too needs to look at its working, right? Because I know that they are not also involved. They've not been involved in all of this conversation, right? They've sidestepped them, which, I mean, you ask yourself, I don't even think the Law Reform Commission too is part of this conversation, right? So you're asking, you sidestep existing entities that have a mandate to perform certain duties, and your commission and the government has their government-run entities. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why do we like reinventing the wheel? Why don't we like agencies take up their mandate and allow them to walk through their mandate and provide effective support for coordination and coherence? So I hope I've answered your question on the safeguards, right? Thank you.
You've done so much justice, and this can only come from a deep wealth of experience. And not so many of us have thought about this representation aspect of the recruitment process of the state police, and how it needs to essentially cover representation of citizens who are living in those communities, and not make it an indigenous police, such that is not weaponized against people who are not indigents of that particular state. And also, it shouldn't be weaponized as a tool for religion, which is one of the concerns, the major concerns that Professor Chidi raised when he talked about the various militias that are currently in existence. And then if they now begin to give them the form of sophistication that comes with state policing, how it will definitely become chaotic across the country. And this is one of the major things that I think is a safeguard that people should really take into consideration as well. So on this note, I also like to ask the next question. I would like to push it to Funke Barua. So, Funke, how do we ensure that decentralization of policing does not become decentralization of human rights violations? How do you think decentralization of policing does not become decentralization of human rights violations, human rights violations? Is Funke still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Hi.
awesome. Got you.
Currently, I put
On
on
my videos, thinking I put on the audio.
It's gone up again.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I was trying to respond to what you said and said that in the beginning I talked about not merely decentralizing the existing Nigeria police force, but really genuinely creating a dual policing structure. For me, the best way to do that, like I said, and you repeated, is to make sure that we're not just, decentralizing the police as it is. There has to be some improvements. And the CP already mentioned the issue of training. If we just give guns, ammunition, and illegal bases, for police structures in the state, we'll probably just be arming people that have no business being in the police in the first place. And Professor Chidi put it aptly when it was, and that just like you got scared, I also got scared. And I'm also asking Professor Chidi to add me to his bags, to look for something. Because if we have an Amotekun, we have the ones in the east, you have the ones in the north, and all those people just being armed and translated into police officers to just be like military men wearing agbaja and claiming to be democratized. And we all know what happened since 1999. But anyway, I digress. So the important thing is to make sure that, excuse me, we're not just building it. This is not a special purpose vehicle. We should not be building a state police just because there's insecurity in the land. Of course, that's important to try to crop some things to ensure that there's good policing. But it should be something that is intentional. It should be something that we do knowing what the pros and cons are. And that for me starts from what Mr. Okenwangi said about, reading and looking at the laws, the documentation around this issue. Who has seen it? Where is the original? So many bits and pieces flying around. Do the states themselves even understand this? So that is the starting point. Getting that clear understanding of the structure, being able to say that this is not just something that is targeting a symptom. Human rights issues, human rights abuses are symptoms of a bigger problem. You cannot expect, and I like what the CP said about, you cannot expect the police hold them responsible for human rights infractions when you haven't even trained them. And the good example of his book was, for me, very apt. We need to be able to put these things into perspective before we just launch and unleash fundamentally flawed humans into the system and provide ammunition for them to continue to terrorize citizens. What we'll do is decentralized human rights abuses. And you also aptly mentioned it in your question. So that distinction is very important. We must build state police services that would operate alongside the federal police force, with states acquiring the constitutional authority to establish, to fund, and operate their own police forces, to train, And if state police simply just regurgitates or reproduces what we have, the existing command and control model that we have at the state level, placing the same kind of coercive powers under governance, like I mentioned earlier, without independence and accountability, then we would have decentralized the structure without necessarily decentralizing or democratizing the police. It's just like unleashing a horde of zombies on people, and the numbers and the infractions will be outrageous. What we'll be seeing at the federal level, or what we've seen at the federal level, will be child's play compared to what will happen at the state level, how do you begin to hold 46 states plus your city if that happens accountable? So we're thinking that while the push is important and many people are, we also need to know that not everybody has an altruistic purpose for this. So citizens and civil society actors and the media and those in the forefront of the estate, so we need to be on guard as we deal with this. So back to you, Martin. Thank you.
Wonderful. So citizens need to be very watchful, and they need to essentially own the process in total. So I'd like to ask Okechukwu Nwaguma. So are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So what happens to states with limited revenue and weak institutional capacity in terms of is it because we don't even know where we are headed, we don't even know what the law is and how it's going to be implemented, But in your opinion, if it was, since it's going to be a federal, it's going to be decentralized, and then every federating unit has a right to set up a police, will this automatically mean that every state governor is compelled to set up state police, or states will ratify them at the time where they want to ratify them, and then those who don't have money can say, oh, I cannot start enforcing, or rather, I can't create state police as it were, and it should be a pass for them not to have that. What do you think is going to be the case in terms of for states that have limited revenue and weak institutional capacity? What do you think the way out is?
Okay, so the challenge for me is that a lot of states are struggling to pay their workforce. In many states, civil servants are not paid as at when due. Pensioners are not being paid as at when due. So when you when you ask states to simply create state police simply because the Constitution has permitted them to do that, not because they are prepared for that, you are simply going to have states take on additional burden. And I mean, Prof. Chidi, I think he has sufficiently addressed this question. They are going to recruit people that they are not going to be able to pay, and then they will still arm them, give them uniform, and what would they do with it? The answer is as predictable, as obvious as you can see, and that is why I hear them talk about preparedness and all that. They have to first of all create put in place certain certain structures in place, and that the federal authorities, because I think that's what they talk about, national standards by which every state will be assessed to determine its level of preparedness. So the federal authorities will then certify them. But the truth is that the parameters for this certification may not be as transparent as and clear as possible for us to know. So what is going to happen is that every state is going to, and I hear that in some states they're already beginning to recruit for states that already have, bodies that are carrying out law enforcement functions, like in Anambra, where you have what's it called now? This other, formation that the governors set up. We're simply going to transform them into state police. There are states that do not have. It's not just a question of states not even having the resources to pay. It's also that the priorities of these governors are not about the people. Even when they have the resources to pay, workers and pensioners. They prefer to divide the resources. So at the end of the day, what you have is a situation where they will establish state police, recruit more workforce. They will not be able to pay them, and then they arm them, and then they begin to prey on the people. The people, they become, predators, and human rights violations will simply increase. So that is what we're likely going to see.
You're mute, Martin.
Thank you very much, Abby. So, Professor Chidi, this question will be going to you because I think it has some form of legal component in it. So, in a situation where federal and state police disagree over an operation, who do you think who should have the final authority? Because we know that there are some offenses under the law that are federal offenses, they are state offenses. How do we differentiate this? Could having multiple police structures create jurisdictional confusion rather than improve insecurity in Nigeria? Prof? If you're speaking, you're muted, sir. Prof, are you still there? Okay, so maybe I should ask Mrs. Okeando this question because she's also has got deep legal understanding of these issues. So, Ma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. So I was asking, in a situation where federal and state police disagree over an operation, we already know that there are federal offenses and there are state offenses under the act, under the law, basically. And who do you think should have a final authority? Could having multiple police structures create jurisdictional confusion rather than improve security?
This is one area we had extensive conversation about when we were putting together a memorandum, at P1 when for submission. Because if you look at the one of the documents, which is maybe the bill that is being put forward, it had highlighted the areas of jurisdiction for the federal police. I think the area for where we would have challenges goes beyond the state police and the federal police. So, for example, when you say federal offenses, there are law enforcement agencies already established that are looking at certain federal offenses, right? So you have the NDLEA, you have ICPC, you have EFCC, and those agencies are not going to be collapsed. From the way we're looking at it, they're going to remain independent, and so they're not going to be collapsed into the police, right? There's no conversation around that. Mind you, the investigation departments of most of these agencies are manned by police officers on secondment from the Nigerian police force. The other element of it is the one you and I, NSCDC. So I had a conversation this morning with a colleague that in the police, because I asked him, I said, how are you guys when you guys say you're looking at critical infrastructure, government infrastructure, that's also within the mandate of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, right? How are we going to ensure that there's no friction here? and he said, "Oh, welfare of people, welfare of the people, safety of lives and property is the primary responsibility of the police." I said, I hear you. And that's the challenge I had with that omnibus clause that is in the police bill that says that the police would now look at offenses that most likely could cause national, that maybe could cause national insecurity. And I'm like, that's too fluid. What are the offenses that could elevate to national insecurity? Kidnapping, for example, all of us are complaining about kidnapping across the country, across board. Kidnapping, ideally, primarily, is a state offense. Does it become an issue of national security because every country, every state is going to be complaining about it? So unless there are clear scope, very clear scope, we would find the overlap. And then you will see the war of superiority context that would come to play, right? They say that I think there's the document I saw, they have a parameter that needs to be followed through for the federal police to be brought into a state, right? But that trigger for that process to happen needs to happen, I think, by the governor. I'm not sure even if it's either the governor or the State House of Assembly. And we ask because we look at the political interests in the country, and this is the power play we've been talking about, we're asking how independent and how objective would be that trigger. Would that trigger happen at the national, or it would happen at the subnational? If it happens at the national, can it be used as a trigger for the federal to come into an opposition state? Because there are omnibus clauses that are fluid. We are seeing agencies that have cross mandates. And that's why I said I had initially highlighted the absence or the exclusion of the Law Reform Commission, for whatever it's worth, in this process, right? Because they ought to be the repository of government laws, right? And that we now look at, if you are going to do this right, as my sister Funke said, then we should do it properly and do it right. And then look at agencies that have cross mandates and isolate these agencies and let agencies be nimble and strategic and focused and properly resourced by either financially or manpower to tackle the core mandate and move away from these fluid languages that we have, that we push around because we say we don't know what would happen. Yeah. And that's where I will stop. I know I'm rambling, but I hope I've made some sense. Thank you.
You did make so much sense, ma'am. So at this point, I would like to ask to find out from the audience, just before we give the final, because the final question to every panelist will be, if you had to advise a presidential working group, this question is to all our panelists, would you recommend that the Nigeria proceed with the state police? And what are the 3 safeguards you would consider absolutely non-negotiable? I think we got that from Mrs. Okeyondo, like her own safeguards are powerful solutions. I don't know if she will have more, but this is going to be what everyone will give as their final remarks. But for now, I'm throwing the floor open to anyone who has questions. If you have questions you want to ask, please let us know. Do you want to speak so that we can give you the opportunity to do so? Okay, so do we have somebody, Michael Ebofin?
Yeah, thank you very much, and kudos to the organizer, Global Rights Nigeria, and also the speakers who have been handling the topic so much. I think we are really engaging. Thank you very much. Yes, something stands out about this community policing, decentralization of Nigerian police force. But we feel it is good to have this community policing, whichever way they're going to coin it out. But there should be a guideline that will direct and they handle it properly, because we have been having some issues about even some of these local securities or agencies being used by some governors. So if they are now holding on to the community, to the police in quotes, I think it's going to be serious when they will be carrying sophisticated weapons, and they may not really be tamed at all. I think there should be better guideline, and if anyone defaults from that, the governor should be handled properly. I think if that is done, it will really help us, because the community people, they understand themselves better. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Do we have another person with remarks, questions? Oluwaseun Oluwadamilare.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Sure, we can hear you.
I want to greet all our panelists and the host. In my own view, a question to ask, because sometimes ago I interview some police officers, Nigerian police officers, and I asked them, are you guys enjoying this and that? Some of them said they are the one buying the kits, buying the uniform, buying everything. And if the federal policing is having such issue, how will the worst one not happen? That is my question in this community policing. Thank you.
I think Mrs. Okeondo has basically explained what's the difference on the chat box between community policing and what we have as state police, and we've had a lot of conversations around that. But before then, let me take Moses Adedeji. Moses Adedeji. Moses, we can hear you, but there's background noise. Okay. I think he has a situation there. Does anyone else have contribution? In the absence of that, so let's just...
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Moses. You're back. Welcome back.
Okay, thank you very much. And my wonderful Global Rights family and the entire civil society participating in this historic visual event. I want to thank all the speakers for wonderful contribution. My name is Moses Adedeji, Executive Director of Trees on Net Development Foundation, based in rural community, that's Ogonimagongo local government, Kogi State. So, and I just want to ask a question. In a situation whereby this state police approved and the federal police equally be in existence, which will equally bring conflicts, what about some vigilantes, like in Kogi State now? We have 2 gazetted vigilantes that is operating today. We have Kogi State Vigilante Group, and we have Homa Hunters. So in a situation where by state police is being constituted, don't you see that it will bring conflict, because the state vigilante and the Homa Hunters will be taking directive from the state government, because established by the state police. So don't you think this one will call it bring conflicts between the state police and federal? So, and I think there should be a need for scrapping, if at all they are going to establish state police. They should, state government should not have, just like Amotekun now, we call it be in existence. So Amotekun will equally be conflicting federal taking a directive from the state government with the state police and disrespecting the federal police. So don't you think that state constitutional vigilante and security outfit should be
Okay, we get your question, Moses. We get your question, Moses. I don't know who you're directing your question at, but I hope that the panelists will do justice to it. Thank you so much. Okay, so based on this, we will then take Oga Okechukwu. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. So if you were to advise the presidential working group today, would you recommend that Nigeria proceed with the state police? And what are the 3 safeguards you would consider absolutely non-negotiable?
Okay, so I think that my recommendation to the presidential working group would be that the working group should not treat state police simply as a transfer of coercive power from Abuja to state government houses. And they need to make this a national conversation. You know, they need to be transparent, engage with citizens, because this is about the citizens. The idea is to build a system in which policing is decentralized but professional, operationally independent, adequately funded, human rights compliant, and subject to strong civilian accountability. In other words, decentralize policing, but do not decentralize impunity. And I think that civil society should move from, I mean, it has moved from the question of whether you support or not, support. We should actively engage with the implementation framework. We should scrutinize the proposed legislation if they are made public. We should demand clear safeguards, monitor recruitment and institutional readiness, insist on human rights standards, develop election-specific safeguards. And I see that nobody has talked about how state police will also impact elections, especially as we are going into 2027. And then establish mechanisms for monitoring state police once they become operational. Civil society should also continue demanding implementation of the Police Act 2020. Our role should be to ensure that security reform does not come at the expense of democratic accountability and human rights. Thank you.
Awesome. Can we have CP, Dr. Emmanuel Ojukwu, sir?
Okay. There is one aspect of the conversation we have not addressed, which National Planning Committee must look into. Nigeria Police is the largest and the oldest organized law enforcement agency in this country. It's more than nearly 200 years old. So we make a mistake when you marry a new wife, you just discard or treat the old wife anyhow. That's a grievous error. They must address the fear of retrenchment in the current Nigeria police. The strength is the largest police force in sub-Saharan Africa. The strength as at March was 273,000. Where do they fit in? How do they fit into the state policing? That must be properly addressed even now. Otherwise, we may have a mutiny in the system before state police comes on board. Number 2 is about funding, which somebody has mentioned. Every state will have its own police, state police, staffed, funded according to their needs. You don't need to have 5,000 police officers in Zamfara, and then you have 2,000 in Lagos. What is the population? The current Nigeria police ratio to citizens is 1 policeman to over 800, which is still a shame. So what is going to be the ratio in the states? This will have to be determined. To fund a policeman, to keep 1 policeman, I saw a record by Lagos State Security Trust Fund. They say it will cost like 3 million naira to kit one policeman. How many states in Nigeria can afford that? A police uniform alone, you have like 17 items on one police uniform. Each of them costs money. Each of them costs money. Police uniform, like Nigeria, current Nigeria police, you have uniform for Monday and Tuesday, uniform for Wednesday and Thursday, uniform from Friday to Sunday. Different uniforms, different requirements, different cost implications. It's not like you work in Ministry of Works. There should be used for wedding on Sunday, used on Monday. No, it's not so. There are cost implications. And this will have to be done ab initio. Otherwise, the police will fend for themselves. And when they fend for themselves, let nobody blame the victim. That is issue of. There are many poor states in Nigeria. I've seen a lot of Kebbi, Sokoto, Bayelsa, and the rest of them. Very poor. How much money can they afford to do that? Which I think they must look into is, which I've mentioned earlier on, the procedure of policing. I thank Kemi Okoyondo. She mentioned state police different from community policing. Community policing is just a way of policing. If you have state police, you must cooperate with the various communities where you serve. There must be part of getting solutions to issues affecting you, because every crime is local as policing is local. If you wear the shoes, you know where it's pinching you. Communities will make a contribution to the police on what they're facing, their fears, and they and the police will join hands to solve those problems. So policing is not for the people, it is with the people. That is community policing. Now, when you have such a state police operating, how do they do the police work? That is where code of conduct will come in. If somebody does what he ought not to do, you can hold him responsible. Or fails to do what he ought to do, you can hold him responsible. But he must have at his fingertips, by training, capacity development, and what have you, on the procedures and processes of doing police work. If these three things, in my estimation, and there are many more, are not properly looked into, we may hit the brick wall from day one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for that. Please, can we move to Funke Barua for her final remarks on that, and then safeguards.
Hello, Martin.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you please take that again?
Okay, so the question is, if you were to advise the presidential working group today, would you recommend that Nigeria proceed with state police? And what are the three safeguards you would consider absolutely non-negotiable?
So my answer would be, yes, I know we're short on time. It would be yes, I would advise that my three non-negotiable, I wish I could, would be training. We cannot emphasize that enough, because I think that it's adequate training would really even solve most of the problems that we're having. That for me is non-negotiable. And I will put them as my top three for emphasis. We're passing this, whether we like it or not, this is going to happen. I think we should all just come to terms with that, considering the speed that has gone into this legislation. And as you can see, someone on the chat platform also even wrote that it's on steroids. It took 14 years to pass the Police Act, but this has just, been so fast-tracked. So for me, training would be key, because that is the foundation and the foundational and fundamental issue around state policing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So can we, Mrs. Okoyondo, you gave a very broad safeguards. So I don't know if you still have more to add, or you, the ones you gave earlier are enough.
I'm not going to add anything. I'll just say, just to respond to Mike from, I think he's from the from Kogi, that talked about the informal police structures within the state that are backed by state edict. And just to say that it's not only in Kogi, across the country, there are informal policing structures that were set up, and some of them have been backed by state edicts. And so the truth is, and I think Professor Dinkalu too mentioned this, and Abe at the beginning, is that state police is not new to us. State police already exist in Nigeria. The only thing we had not done is that we did not amend the constitution. And if we look at what we already have, you can see that's why we're flagging some of the issues we're flagging. That's why that's why we have the fear that this thing that already exists, that look like indigenous entities, that do not mirror the standard of policing, if we put it by legal frameworks and policy frameworks, could evolve, but they're already existing. They could just give them the rubber stamp of state police, right? So that's just that's just the contribution I'd love to make. And I think that if we, God help us, I think if we take things right and we look at it deeply, yes, it's on steroids, but there's no hurry in it, right? There's no hurry in it. Must it be passed in September? I don't know why we want to make sure it's passed in September, months before an election year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ukeyando. So, Chidi, Professor Chidi Adinkalu, you have the floor now, if you're still here.
All right.
So what the question is, what would be your advice to Presidential Working Group? Would you recommend that we proceed with the state police? And what are your 3 safeguards you will consider non-negotiable?
Well, most have already been given. Thank you very much for this. And for those who have lasted, thank you also for their stamina and durability. Much of what I could say in response to that has been said. I just want to flag Kemi's last point. Bishop Kukah has gone around as usual, hawking his useless and worthless peace agreement or whatever for people to sign, that nobody respects. The only reason I mention that is it says election campaign season is on. Politicians typically have no bandwidth during election campaign season. I understand that the proposals from the Gbajabiamila committee are supposed to go into the president next month. This is a president who will be battling for his political life. So it's unrealistic, really, to expect that any sensible consideration will go into this. Many of the members of the National Assembly will not be returning because many of them have lost their tickets. So the question, therefore, is, as Kemi rightly asks, why the hurry? So if you're asking me for a safeguard, it's fairly straightforward. Can we agree that this should not be considered on this side of the election? And secondly, after the election and after the next presidential inauguration, can we have a proper timetable over which consideration should take place, a deliberative process that involves a total and full national participation at multiple levels will then unfold? That will be the only that's the only safeguard I have now. Anything being talked about on this side of the election as state police, in my view, is impractical and, quite honestly, with profound respect, nonsensical. I yield.
Okay, thank you so much. Be that there are acts which include police acts, are there ways we can promote the implementation of these acts? Okay, I think that's a general question or question to think around. So on this note, I want to thank everyone, and I would like to thank you so much for your time so far. Noya, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please. Give us your closing remarks from Global Rights. And thank you so much. Thank you for a fantastic discussion and faculty. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for what has been a very rich and I think very necessary conversation. If there's one thing I'm taking away from this discussion, is that the question is more than whether Nigeria needs state police. It's more of what kind of policing system are we trying to build, and how prepared are we to put the necessary foundations in place before we do it. We heard very clearly that Nigeria's policing challenges are real, and we understand the need for policing that is closer to and more responsive to the communities. But we've also heard some very important warnings today about how decentralizing policing must not mean decentralizing impunity. And that point came through in different ways throughout the discussion. We heard concerns about political capture and the concentration of power at the state level, the need for independent oversight, clear jurisdiction between federal and state institutions, and safeguards against the use of state police for political repression, especially as we move towards the 2027 elections. We also talked about professionalism, training, and welfare, and how we can create a new policing structure by simply changing uniforms. So yes, everything has been clearly stated, how much we need a system that is professional, properly trained, adequately funded, operationally independent, and responsive to the communities that it serves, and how the process must remain open to citizens. And so this has been a very rich and interesting conversation, and it cannot end with this webinar. We are still at a very important stage in the development of this proposed bill, and there is still an opportunity for stakeholders to engage with the process and put forward their concerns and recommendations. So on behalf of Global Rights, I want to thank immensely our speakers, Ms. Kemi Okeodo, Ms. Funke Barua, Professor Chidi Odinkalu, Dr. Okechukwu, Dr. Ojukwu. Thank you all so much. And of course, our Executive Director, Ms. Abiodun Baiwo, and our Board Chair, Professor Chidi Odinkalu, and our moderator, Mr. Martin Obono. Thank you for everyone who joined us and contributed to the discussion today. Thank you for giving us your time, and more importantly, for engaging with what is a very consequential conversation for Nigeria's security and democratic future. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.